So, for example, you're an unempathetic creature who genuinely just doesn't care for the well-being of others, and if that person,
now you're going to a broken person.
Well,
you're
but
giving
by what
me
standard?
Well, okay, but morality applies to the factual requirements of human beings given the kind of animals that we are under normal circumstances. If you tell me, well, what about a psychopath who doesn't care about anybody? How are you going to get him to accept your moral code? I'm not going to get him to accept my moral code. He can't understand why or wouldn't even care to understand
But is
why.
he acting unethically?
He's acting unethically from my perspective, even though he can't understand it.
But is he acting unethically? Because from my standard, sounds awfully subjective. Is he acting immorally, objectively?
He's acting objectively immorally given the factual requirements of human life, which he apparently cannot understand because he is a broken human being.
But if it's a factual requirement of human life, then he can't be a human life without that thing. It can't be a factual requirement of human life, because here's a human life that doesn't have that.
So yeah, when we're talking about a class of anything, we're talking about the general characteristics of that class. Now, there are always outliers, and in the case of human beings, there are outliers, borderline cases, where take Terry Schiavo, who in Florida, 15, 20 years ago, was essentially brain dead, and she was in the hospital. You know the case.
Yeah.
And so the question was, some of her family wanted to pull the plug and let her die, and others were saying, no, we want to keep her alive because God or something. And she was clearly, her brain was just sauce. She was not a living being. So did Terry Schiavo have rights? Did she have a right to live at that point? Well, no, she wasn't even there anymore. There was no there. And in the case of the kind of person you're talking about, a psychopath who, if you let him out, is going to run around and try to kill people or something, this is a subhuman creature to whom morality does not apply anymore because he's so broken that there's no there.
They're still alive. They're still rational creature. They're still Homo sapiens.
He's not a rational creature.
He's rational in, let's say, every other respect. Because again, I'm supposing we're going to sort of bracket this moral thing because that's the thing we're investigating. I'm saying in every other respect, this person can do maths. This person could do.
Sure, he's got legs. He's got a thumb.
The only thing that's different about this person and you and me is that this person doesn't care about the suffering of others. That's literally the only difference. I mean, imagine literally a twin Craig sat next to you who is. Even in this conversation, like everything is exactly the same.
Yeah.
Except that they just don't care for other people. For that person, if somehow the death of an innocent person that they don't care about were going to turn them into a billionaire, and suppose that being a billionaire is actually going to be good for them, then because they don't, I mean, I would look at them going and murdering that person, and I would go, boo. And certain forms of moral objectivists, divine command theorists would say it doesn't matter what your flourishing, your life, all this kind of stuff. What matters is that this is wrong in principle. But for the person who just says that the only reason this could possibly be wrong is insofar as it's derived from some course of action that diminishes my prospects for life and flourishing, it doesn't diminish this person's prospects.
No, but it killed an innocent person. So let me take. But
then again, we're moving from the life and death requirement of the moral actor. And
I'm going to stick with your guy. I'm not going to focus on the moral actor. On the victim. Beyond the point of just pointing out that the victim had a right to life because he was a human being who was respecting rights, presumably. Now, if the psychopath kills Hitler, I don't care. But if it's a rights-respecting human being who has rights. Let me finish the question. If the psychopath goes and kills the guy, and your position is, well, if he's an egoist and he thought that was good for him, what's the problem? Egoism is not that blinded by the full context of the situation of what it means to live a human life. An egoist doesn't say, anything that works for me, I'm going to do, come hell or high water, even if it includes violating other people's rights. And if somebody doesn't understand that and can't be convinced of it and is going to go commit violence, and we know that, or if he actually does commit violence, it doesn't matter what he thinks. It doesn't matter what he values. It doesn't matter what he's willing to do. We have a right, based on the fact that our life is our proper ultimate end, and that we understand that life is the standard of value and that human beings have rights. We have a right to say, you are too broken to be free. You have to be in a home, and it's very unfortunate, but that's the way it is. Now, if you're unsatisfied with that answer, all I can say to you is, it's both moral and practical from my perspective, and I think it makes sense. And the alternative is only that we're going to have him run around and just say boo to him every time he kills somebody. I don't say boo when somebody kills somebody else. I say that's a violation of the fundamental principles of morality. First of all, you violated rights. And secondly, you violated every other principle, tying all the way down to the fact that human life is the standard of moral value. So, I mean, we'll just have to disagree on this point if my explanation of the fact that we who do recognize human life in individuals as having a right to their life as the standards here, have the right to put that guy in a cage and say, you can't be free.
But that standard relies on the very thing that you're trying to justify, which is the existence of objectively moral properties of the universe, such as rights.
Oh, no.
So the introduction of rights, for example.
Rights are not intrinsic. So you're assuming that rights are out there.
No.
They're not.
Because you were saying a moment ago that, the sort of grounding of ethics is rational egoism. Mm-hmm. However, the rational egoist isn't blind to things like the rights that another person has. Well, yeah. Why would the rational egoist care about the rights of another person? Well, what are these rights? If ethics is just about me and my sort of rational prolonging of my prospects of survival,
the rational part of the rational egoist means that he's going to use his mind. He's going to take into account all of the relevant facts surrounding his life. And one of those relevant facts is that other people can be, and often are, and in many ways specifically to his life are, enormously valuable. He has to buy groceries. Somebody's got to make those groceries. He's got friends. He's got people he goes dancing with. He has drinking buddies. He's got the whole 9 yards. And so he realizes that other people, A, can be of value to him. He also realizes that they have minds and bodies and therefore have rights to live their own lives. And he respects rights because, being a rational person, he thinks in terms of principles, not in terms of what can I get away with. So I think the rational part of rational egoism has to be emphasized here.
None of that applies to this psychopath, right? And so when you
no,
put this,
because he's a psychopath. That's why we have that term.
But when you put this psychopath, and a psychopath is just a descriptive statement to describe a person with a certain kind of brain. That's all it is.
Yeah.
And if you put this person in jail, I would say that of course it's rational to do that because I care about my well-being. This person's going to really, really mess up my well-being and that of people I care about. So I put him behind bars. But I recognize that I put him behind bars because I don't want him to be free. Not because he is not abiding by an objective standard that would exist regardless of what my preferences are.
I'm not putting him behind because he's not abiding by objective standard either, because he can't. He's a psychopath. But if your definition here is that he's incapable of thinking in those terms, I'm not like, well, hey, you're doing the wrong thing. He can't be wrong. He's so broken that he's just dangerous without even being wrong.
So he's not doing something wrong then?
No, he's outside of morality. He's not even a moral creature. He's so broken that he has no capacity to be moral or immoral or anything else.
But he can still make decisions about whether he lives or dies. Because here's the next problem. Yeah. A moment ago we were told that what ethics is essentially the product of people making decisions about what's going to make them live or die. And as long as you're able to do that, that makes you an ethical creature. But now here's a further counterexample of the psychopath who can still make decisions that will either lead to prolonging his life or to his death. But now you're saying that this is not a moral creature. So once again, another example of why I don't think that morality is intrinsically tied to life and death in the way that you were saying earlier.
When we use concepts, so if I use the concept of man, that concept refers to not only a rational animal, which would be the definition of man, it refers to all of the characteristics of man, qua his normal circumstances as a being we call man. If I use the concept of dog, you would bring to mind an animal with 4 legs and a tail and this, that, and the other. And if I said, well, what about this dog over here? It only has 3 legs. How can you call him a dog? You would say, well, that's a special circumstance. He's a broken dog, and he's a dog in certain respects, but he's not a complete dog. I'm telling you now that this person is so incomplete in the sense that his capacity to understand the fact that other people own their lives and have a moral right to live, and his inability to understand and operate on that principle makes him too dangerous for us to have out running around.
For us.
And therefore, for us. And we have a right, because he will kill people if we let him run around, to put him in a cage and say, this is just too bad.